You know what?
Just do what you do, Aaron.
I'm Aaron Ritchie.
I'm Mark Rial.
And this is the YMC. When you're developing for web, you have to account for browser latency. And a lot of websites that are being developed now are so image heavy that we figured it's essential to have this basic understanding of optimizing images for web.
There's that general, I guess, standard that if a website doesn't appear and is usable within 3 to 5 seconds, a user is liable to bounce off the site. And I think we've all had experience with, poorly optimized sites where, you can actually see the image gradually coming in. That's the kind of thing that you want to try to avoid at all costs. JavaScript is the programming language of the web browser. And you use JavaScript to do a number of things. Most visibly, it has aspects where it controls the interface, right? So whereas HTML controls the content, CSS controls the design, JavaScript controls a lot of the interactions that we have with our web projects. Today, we've actually got quite a few things that we're hoping to take a look at. We're going to be leading off with Aaron Ritchie doing his classic presentation on image optimization. Aaron, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to image optimization and color palettes for images for your website. All right, image optimization. What is it? Image optimization is the process of reducing the file size of an image while preserving its quality. This helps to reduce the latency of a web page. Latency means the load time. So when you're dealing with images for web, there's 3 basic file formats you're going to be dealing with: JPEG, GIF, and PNG. There's also bitmap, but you don't ever use bitmap on web. It's too large. So JPEG is a form of lossy compression, meaning that when it compresses, it loses quality. It supports 24-bit color. It doesn't support transparency. Its best use is for photographs. GIF is a form of lossless compression, meaning it doesn't lose quality when you compress it. It uses indexed color. It supports animation. I'm sure you've seen all those stupid little animated GIFs from the 1990s. No one ever uses those anymore. It supports dithering, and it's best for images with a few colors. So for your company logo, if your logo is just blue or red, then that's the best practical use for a GIF. A PNG is another form of lossless compression. It supports 8, 24, and 32-bit color, and alpha transparency. It works well with any image, but it's not supported by some browsers. So these are the different color depths. 8-bit is 256 colors, 24-bit is 16.7 million, and 32-bit is 14.2 billion colors. Usually you'll just go with 24-bit because the human eye can't really detect that many 14.2 billion colors. It can't really tell the difference, so 24-bit is your best bet to go with. So let's start with JPEG compression. This form of compression discards color information, and it reduces the image detail. Every time you resave the image further, it's recompressing, so it's going to lose quality each time you save it. So that's something you can keep note of. If you're going to be working with a JPEG, it's best to start with a bitmap, because a bitmap is lossless and it's full color. And then when you're saving your final image, save it to JPEG. So here is a bitmap that has been compressed as a JPEG, and its quality level is 100. So you can see extreme detail in the feathers and the beak and the eye. This one has been compressed, and now it's at quality level 70. If you look very carefully, especially in the beak, you can see it start to blur slightly. This is quality level 40. So compared to 100, you can see it's starting to get a lot blurrier. And then 10, you can really see the difference. It starts to create color blocks and artifacts. So you almost never try and compress it this much, otherwise it will look terrible on your website. GIF compression does not reduce the quality. However, you're limited to using 256 colors. These can be any of the any colors that you want from the 24-bit palette. So you have millions of colors to choose from, but you can only use 256 of them, which is why it's best to use an image with very few colors for GIF compression. So here's an example of a GIF palette. So this is the Windows palette. So here's the exact same image compressed in JPEG, GIF, and PNG. The JPEG is 39.8 kilobytes, so that is the smallest file size of the three. But remember that as you save it, its quality is reduced. The GIF comes in second at 59.9, and it becomes smaller as you use less colors. The PNG is the largest, 330 kilobytes, and its file size becomes smaller as its bit depth is lowered. And that's it for image optimization.
Today's session is about Java, although we started off with like color palettes and the different types of image like file formats, which actually I thought was really interesting. Like, I mean, I kind of keep going back to the same example, but I work with a lot of artists, like graphic designers and developers in my job, and just learning about like the different bit colors and like all that stuff. It's really cool for me to see kind of the behind the scenes of it, with the stuff that I work with day to day.
So JavaScript, in a nutshell, we want to think of it as the programming language of the web browser. So this will be our first real intro into a programming language. So going back to what we've discussed in terms of HTML, and we look at HTML being responsible for what something is, and we want to take a look at CSS as how something appears, right? So separating content from design. We also want to take into account as something that's become more and more of a factor as the years have gone on, is how something behaves and actions, right? And that's just kind of like a little sample of what JavaScript does. So basically, any interface type of effect that you've seen online, more and more these days, especially for social networking sites such as, you know, your Facebook and Twitter and what have you, those are generally governed by JavaScript, right? So JavaScript tells the browser how something should behave, including the browser itself, right? So we can actually access aspects of the browser and, you know, basically tell the browser what to do, right? So there's a lot of different plugins that we get. With JavaScript, you can build tools in addition to having interface effects. So just wanted to give some quick examples of what I mean by interface effects and how kind of prevalent they are. On this page itself, we can actually see a few results of JavaScript. You see how this thing is moving, right? So we're not talking about the content, we're not talking about the design, but you see how we've got this animated strip in here, this content going down, also this animated scroll bar at the top of topics going on. That kind of stuff is all governed by JavaScript. Similarly, if we were to click on the sign-in button on the Twitter page, the way that thing pops open, same type of deal. That kind of stuff is all JavaScript related. So something worth mentioning is that the same logic that we used last week when we were talking about our CSS and how you can have one CSS file governing multiple HTML files, the same kind of rule of thumb goes for JavaScript. Eventually, you know, what we would end up having is multiple HTML files, and they would be, the design and the layout would be governed by one CSS file. It would be governing the design of all these things. And then you would have your JavaScript file. And I guess worth mentioning that just so everybody knows, a JavaScript file will be a .js extension. So we've had .html, .css, JavaScript will be .js. JavaScript file will be governing the action and behavior of those files, right? So we're going to have our core HTML files, and we'll have our two external CSS and JavaScript files by the end of this. So again, I'm using Expression Web here. Same thing if you have Notepad++ or any other programs, you'll get the same results. So I want to tell the browser that I want to include some script in here, and the type of script I'm going to be including is JavaScript. Right, so I got what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be opening and closing a script tag within the head. If you guys remember last week when we dealt with embedded CSS stuff, we had opening and closing style tags in there. This time we're going to be using an opening and closing script tag. And within the script tag, we're going to run a very, very basic JavaScript. and some general constructs that we'll want to get accustomed to. Generally, every instruction or every line of JavaScript is going to be ending with a semicolon, very similar to how we got going with CSS, right? Most of our CSS rules ended with a semicolon. And we'll be seeing a lot of the opening and closing parentheses as well. And as we get into more of those, I'll kind of explain some aspects more and more. Very, very happy to be joined today by the one guy who's been a guest speaker at every YMC season so far. He's been off doing his thing in the video game industry for the last few years and always comes packed with a whole bunch of interesting facts and knowledge about video games and how it relates to what it is we're talking about. So please welcome Joe Pasek.
So where were games available in 2000? Well, they were on your PlayStation, your Nintendo 64, your Dreamcast, computer. And for mobile, you could play your Game Boy. That was basically it. 10 years later, a lot more places. There's still the big three consoles. You know, we've got PlayStation 3, we've got the Nintendo, and we've got the Xbox 360 for Microsoft. But there's also, you know, we still got PC, which is a huge part, even though it's had its decline because of the power of the consoles. But now we're starting to see games on the web, on your phone, even on our social networking sites like Facebook and MySpace. So I want to talk about the social gaming phenomenon. With social games, it's all about short little spurts of actions. Hey, let's log into Farmville here, and I'm going to plant some seeds and water them, and then I'm going to go back to my Microsoft Word document that I've been working on. A bit on the model behind social network games is you've got your MySpace and your Facebook, and you've got Facebook powered by PHP on the back end, and then you have Flash and Unity sitting on the front end, which actually operate from within your browser. So basically, you're taking input in the browser, and you're bouncing it back through JavaScript communication to the social network, which then logs it into the database, and that's where you get all your cool things where it's syncing to your Facebook list, and people get all these nice little updates saying, hey, you know, I just grew like 300 things of corn. And why do we make these games that are, you know, just so, to me, seem ridiculous and tedious as to going and planting corn for 5 minutes and then going back to your Word document and then 20 minutes later going back and checking again? Why do we do it? Money. Basically, Farmville, well, they made over $800,000 in 3 weeks with this game. And this is a free game. You don't pay to play the game. They use what we call microtransactions. What is a microtransaction? Well, to do the math, Farmville dollars, which is something you can buy. You don't have to, but you can. You buy Farmville dollars, which you can earn through just playing the game normally. You buy those with real dollars, say $5 per user, and that's times 160,000 users. 160,000 users, that's not too hard to get. So $5 user times 160,000 users, that's $800,000. Cool. That being said, Farmville has over 82.4 million users as of May 2010. That's roughly 29.7 million users active daily, and that's 20% of all Facebook users are on Farmville, and that's over 1% of the entire world's population. You see all these people playing games with their children. You know, you've got mom and dad and little kids, and they're all just gathered around their TV, and they're playing these games, and it's a shared experience now. So you combine that with like all the social network stuff that's tightly integrated, and that's where things are moving, where things aren't so much as just a guy sitting on a couch, you know, playing a video game for 60 hours. You're you know, getting up and you're moving and you're playing. That's the future of gaming now. It's just total immersion and, you know, a shared experience.
It was pretty fun today. Definitely, probably the most technical-oriented class so far. We got into our first programming language today.
All right. Today we discussed image optimization for web as well as color palettes.
And then we led into JavaScript, how to use and implement JavaScript on your web projects. And we took a final peek at what we can look forward to in future segments dealing with WordPress and integrating everything we've done into WordPress so far. Next week, we're going to be diving even further into WordPress. We're going to be doing a full installation, getting everybody prepared, whether they're on Windows or Mac platform, and we'll be looking to bring the YMC site together based on the designs that we have going so far and start to get some visual representation of what the new YMC site is going to be looking like.